Welcome back to You're Always Fine, a space to show up for yourself and embrace the mess that lives underneath because, let's be real, it's exhausting always being fine. So grab your headphones and allow yourself to listen, laugh, and even cry because you are not alone and we aren't always fine. And that's okay.
Hey peeps, I'm your host, Kristine.
And I'm Theresa.
All right, TC, I would like to tell you a little story today.
Okay.
So once upon a time, there was this girl and she was okay, she had some self-esteem issues, she had some family stuff going on, but she then met, her Prince Charming, and he came and he swept her off her feet and, gave her confidence, and he proposed. And everyone was like, they faced a little bit of adversity there. They got married and they lived happily ever after.
Well, this is a fairy tale we're talking about.
Yes, this is a classic fairy tale story. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think that from a very young age, that's kind of what we're taught about marriage or like relationships.
Oh,
right?
yeah. That's like what all the Disney movies. Yeah, it's like what all the Disney movies were.
Right? Someone's going to come to save you. And then, happily, and they lived happily ever after.
Correct.
Someone lied to us.
Yeah. Liars. What dream are they selling us? No, that sounds horrible.
It sounds horrible, but seriously, and I'm not even getting into yet around what is modeled in your household in marriage and that effect on, relationships in marriage. But just fundamentally, it feels off, right? When you start thinking about it.
Yeah. I feel like you sell that to people and that's why people don't last, because that's what they expect. And It isn't like that.
So if you haven't guessed today, we are getting into marriage and the incredible amount of work it takes to keep a marriage alive. Of course, every relationship, but specifically today we're diving into marriage.
Yes, we are. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. So happily ever after, the best day of your life, right? I remember thinking this when I got married. It was one of the best days. But man, talk about a poor outlook or a dreary outlook when you think about if that was the best day of my marriage.
Yeah.
What's the kind of, right? I don't know. Don't you think that?
Yeah, I think that mentality, I don't know, not showing the hard parts of marriage, not being realistic. I don't know. To me, it's not realistic. Sometimes you see on Instagram and Facebook, and look, I love my husband. I love him. But if you don't want to kill your person every once in a while, I just don't think your relationship is real. I just don't think it's real.
Well, and also, right, I think so many things, right? Also, no marriage is going to save you. You have to save yourself.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is the person that I was back in 2017 when I got married is nowhere near the person I am today.
Oh, yeah. Major difference.
But yet think about it. It's kind of crazy when you think about you are expected to right, to have and to hold in sickness and in health and all those things. But I'm not sure Carrie would have chosen this version of me. And there's been times where I'm I wouldn't have chose this version of you.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. But I can tell you this era of your life, I wouldn't have looked twice kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I think that's why people give up, because you're sold this idea that everything's perfect. You guys are going to be exactly who you are. And then 10 years later, that's just not even possible. If you just look at your own life, right? Before marriage, I am not, when I was 16 and then 26, I was married by that point, but I was not the same. I'm not the same person. Thank God. If I was the same person I was when I was 16, it just wouldn't, I don't even know if I'd be alive. There's just a lot of growth that you make. And that's why it's really important to have a realistic view of marriage and go into it with the idea that, okay, the core values of my person, I really, really love. I know they're going to change. I know we're going to grow. Hopefully we can do that together. But to go in it with this idea that you're never going to argue, you're never going to fight, you guys aren't going to change in some ways that may be difficult for the other person. It's just not realistic. And I think that's why people quit and give up and don't fight for each other.
And, I think it's so interesting because I've always said that I think that marriages don't break down because there's a lack of love. I firmly believe that marriages break down because there's a lack of communication, or, we start to somehow get off, right? Like off the same page, or a way that used to work to communicate no longer works. So I'm not sure if you experienced this when, you guys were faced, like everything with Owen was happening. And
oh yeah.
But I know
and when you throw kids into the mix also, it's like another complicated like layer, because you're used to going from just each other and like, coming home from work, whatever, you are each other's
phase.
Yeah, like the honeymoon phase, like it's just you guys. And then you bring kids into it, and it's like you automatically see less of each other, or just the quality time is different. And it's an adjustment. And I think it's definitely adjustment in terms of like men do the best that they can to understand it. But like when you're a mom and you have your children, like they just kind of take a front seat, especially in the beginning because they can't fend for themselves. And that's an adjustment. Like, I know that was difficult for Mike and I. It was hard.
Well, so right, it's hard. And then I think that what happens there is like the way you guys used to communicate or show love then changes. And then that gap just kind of keeps growing. I mean, Terry and I saw that happen to us when I got sick. She has always been a big supporter, but everything like she would say that used to maybe be fine, such as like, I miss when you cook for me. I miss doing this for me. I took that as a complete,
it's hard.
Slight against me. She was trying to express something, which is like something she missed that this disease took away from her. But all I felt was guilt and then resentment and anger towards her from that. And so like, all it did was like widen this gap. And it took quite literally us, like, I remember like we wrote an entire workbook essentially about how to reconnect after like tragedy or something happens. Because, again, a different era, you're different people, and like what used to work doesn't work. And you have to, just like anything, right? You have to figure out what you're going to do about that. And I think sometimes we get comfortable in marriage and we just like are like,
definitely,
we don't put that effort in.
Yeah. And in terms of like, let's even talk about like love languages and stuff like that. Those also, I know. Those also can change. Like, okay. Mike's love language has always been like physical affection. Like that's just how he is. And I used to be like that. But now I have kids and they're touching me all the time. So I'm like, by the time he gets home from work, I'm like, just don't touch me. But for me, it's become, because there's more on my plate, there's more to do with the kids. For me, it's like acts of service. Like, if I see you doing the dishes, if I see you sweeping the floor, if I see you like loading the laundry, like, okay.
Without you having to ask.
Yeah, like, okay, we're good. Let's go. You know what I mean? So like, you also have to understand that can change. And there's factors that cause that. And that was a little hard for him. Like, he was like, I don't understand. Like, you always, like, and it's funny, like he'll do like the walking by butt slap. And like, I have a love-hate relationship with that. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. So like, you have to just figure out like along the way, like what is changing and just like adapt. But a lot of people don't want to do that because it's work.
Exactly. It's work. Now, I wasn't going to go here because I know I have a very strong hot take on love languages. And so, but we have arrived. So
we've arrived.
Say, I hate the love languages. But before everyone comes for me in the comments and everything else, please hear me out. I hate the love languages mostly because I think that it was a great tool that was like given for relationships to get people to understand better. However, let's not get into the fact there's not that much empirical evidence around like the substantiation.
Right.
But also, I think it then has become a little bit more like you can only have one of the five. And the reality of it is there's so many more than 5 love languages. And also, I don't think it does a great job of helping you to understand that most of the time you give what you would like to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it does enough to like walk people through to get them like, people use it as this great tool. And I think it falls short and it doesn't like serve people enough, you know, like,
Yeah.
And so that's my issue with it. So it's not really like the it or what it's trying to do. I just think it becomes it's an overgeneralization, as I guess most theories are. But if you don't, right, like you said, acts of service, right? Acts of service are great, but most people don't want that act of service after they have to ask for it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And then it gets into the fact of like, one of the biggest things I've seen it in my own marriage. I have to constantly stop myself, and I see it in all the couples I do. We are under the assumption that if you love me, you would just do this. And if you cared about me, you would stop doing this. And like, that's mind reading. That is games. That is so incredibly toxic for your relationship or marriage to do that. You know, you just brought it up with the butt slaps, a great example, right? So you just said that sometimes you like it and sometimes you don't. So if you were to say, if you love me, you stop doing that, right? And you would tied love to that. Think about how crazy that would be. But sometimes he's allowed to do it and that can like benefit him. But it's confusing. And nobody's
It's very confusing.
Every single second of every single day when you're also constantly changing.
Right. Well, and like that scenario, like him and I have talked about that before because he's like, it's like the Notebook scene. What do you want? What do you want? So we talked about that and I was like, I have to do a better job at communicating with him and he has to do a better job of like assessing the situation. You know, like be a little bit more cognizant of what is happening around. Like I would just like you, like I know you love me. I would like you to just think about like, okay, right now she's got 2 kids wrapped around her ankles. She is loading the dishwasher. She looks stressed. Will this butt slap be well received? Like, you know, so that I think is a way of like, I need to communicate better. And he also needs to kind of like assess the situation. And I think when you do it that way, rather than saying, if you love me, you'll do this, like, it's just an easier way to grow and an easier way to positively feed off of each other.
One, to your point right there too, I think that in most households, right, whether you have children or not, there becomes a like default, either adult or default parent. And I think a lot of times we enable that behavior, right? Like I have enabled it so that my wife literally gets a piece of paper. It could be like, you're the greatest ever. And she'd be like, oh, that's adult paperwork. And she'll hand it right to me. I'm like, did you read the paper? Like, did this? And so, right. I think too, it's so important to realize that like, if you never show your spouse like that it's stressful to have 2 kids around you or like what you do is stressful and you are constantly just kind of like creating this idyllic situation for like the family unit. Well, then how would he ever know when they're like to even assess for that environmental cue you're talking about? Because like he just thinks that you've got it. You're a superhero. It's kind of like what we do to our parents where it's like, oh my God, our parents have emotions. Like I thought they were just like, you know, invincible.
Yeah.
And that's what happens like that. I think that default parent as well. But I want to say this again, like it is not your spouse's job to play Miss Cleo. You know, it's like, it's your job to manage your emotions. It's your job to communicate what you need in the moment. And on top of that, what you really need or want in the moment. Like, I think another great example is like when people like, they have a boys' night and you want to be the cool spouse, right? But, you know, he's had a boys' night or, you know, if you're my wife, you know, a daddy-daughter night, you know, hanging out without me, like, 4 nights. And when they're like, hey, do you mind? It's like, you want to be the cool spouse or you sometimes say yes because you just want to be left alone kind of thing. But then it happens and you don't say that like it's hit a limit or you don't say that like I feel lonely or whatever. Like that's not fair. That puts them in a trap. You know what I mean? And I think like, especially with friends in relationships, like that's really hard because again, we don't want to be controlling. We don't want to, you know, do this. But if you're not expressing your needs or your wants, your partner has no shot at all.
No shot. And then you wind up like, I feel like Mike is kind of like that. Like I'm very like, no, like this is what I want. This is what I don't want. And he kind of in the middle of our marriage would compromise, like when he would really actually want to be doing something else. And like then he would be like really not that happy or like aggravated while we're doing whatever we decided. And I'm like, what's your problem? Like, and then I find out like, oh, well, I would have rather have done this, but I decided to do this for you. I'm like, no,
Don't do shit
like
for me.
I would rather you say what you want and let's do it together. It's like that same weird thing that like Mike and I got in a huge argument when I was pregnant during Christmas because we decided like we're having a baby, let's save money. We're not going to do Christmas gifts. Okay. Like we had a whole conversation about it. We're not going to do Christmas gifts. We are not doing stockings. We are doing quite literally nothing. Okay. So when I say that, we're doing nothing. Like we were very clear. Okay. And his whole family's coming over for Christmas Day to open gifts and stuff. And all of a sudden, oh my God, all of a sudden he's like missing on Christmas Eve because he's like a last minute shopper. And I'm like, I call him. I'm like, where are you and what are you doing? Oh, I'm, just getting some last minute things. And I was like, please tell me that you are not getting me Christmas gifts. Like, and he was like, well, and I was like, no, I don't know because I got you nothing. Like I quite literally got you nothing because we said we were doing nothing.
Not a card.
No, like nothing. So I was freaking out. I was like, now I'm going to look like an asshole in front of your family because there's no gift. Like I was
like pretty, I mean, I know you've known Mike's family for a while, but right. You add factors, right? Like exactly what you're saying. Like now you're worried, not even about what you said to Mike. You're worried about what it looks like to everyone because again, marriage is also this weird game of like, everyone has a judgment on it, right? Like, it's you're nasty. Oh, you're so mean to your spouse. Or like they don't have any backstory or any whatever. No one will care that like you guys said this and he just decided not to listen. All the my poor Filipino son who did not get to get any gifts from his horrible wife.
I know. And I'm like pregnant as hell. I'm like, dude. And he's like, I can't believe you're mad at me. I'm just trying to give you a good Christmas. I'm like, Mike, we talked about this. Like and he's like, well, girls do that thing. I'm like, I don't know who you think I am. You have known me since I was 14. Like, there is no mind games with me. I'm like, I don't have a gift for you. You're getting nothing. Like,
and I'm going to have to handle, thank God you have a really awesome mother-in-law, like, who's probably like, good, get him nothing. But,
oh my God.
Whoever in the past, whoever maybe before you, I mean, granted, you guys were 14, so I don't know what damage like happened but in middle school, but potentially, right? There's some sort of unwritten rule where it's like, if I say that it's good and somebody else either gets in my head or be like, oh, bro, like, she says it's good, but you better have something for her for Christmas. Like, that would like way more than like whatever conversation you mutually had. So, again, like other outside factors outside of like what we communicated and trusting that when we come to the table, I'm bringing my honest emotions and you're bringing your honest emotions and we're getting to the highest possible level we can get to together for our marriage. Right. We're talking just about compromise. And I actually have a very strong, people say marriage is compromise and I say BS. Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on marriage being compromised. Again, before you kill me, hear me out. I believe that compromise ends up being currency. And
I like that.
I think it becomes very dangerous. So when
it's like a tit for tat.
Exactly. And but hear me out. So because what usually happens is compromise. One person can compromise about pizza or Chinese. Oh, I wanted Chinese, but you wanted pizza. So I didn't care as much. So I just let you have the pizza. And then I do that, let's say like several times with small things like that. And then we're about to decide, I got this new job and I want to move across the country. And you don't. And now we come to the table to discuss this like big life thing. And you come here and you empty out your pockets of all your compromised currency and say like, I'm always doing this for you. I'm always, compromising this and that. And now, right, you're trying to cash in and say like, no,
that does happen.
And it does happen. And so what I like to say and like what I really have to actively work hard in my marriage is like you, me, and our marriage. There are three people in a marriage. Our marriage is one person. And for me, it's easier to think about it that way. But like it's Carrie's wants, Kristine's wants, and then the highest possible place we can get our marriage together. Where I don't feel like I'm compromising and you don't, like no one feels like they're giving anything up. It's just like the highest level together that we can get. Not the highest level individually, the highest level together. And I think,
But that's what's so important, because that's not how culture today embrace it. Like, first of all, I don't really feel like culture embraces marriage at all, but I feel like that's not how marriage is looked at today. It's very like you oriented. And I do think that's why people don't stay together. I do think that's why people fail, because they have this idea that like me, 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 and it doesn't work that way. And like you said, if you compromise too much, you're going to get resentful. You're going to get, like there should be a third option. There's what you want, your spouse wants, and then what you want together.
Exactly. And you're married. And like I said, for me, I like thinking of it as a completely separate person, because then I'm allowed to I can come to the table and feel and be so incredibly selfish, because then at the end of the day, that's not what, that's one piece of that like end person's decision that's going to make. Right. And the reality of it is like when you care about someone and then you hear out, like I say, Carrie and I always come to like the table, proverbial table, or, island, whatever, like, and I want to know every single part of like why she's resistant to something. Moving here is a great example. Granted, she didn't have great answers. Like, she'd be like, oh, I think she was like, well, how we lived in DC before we moved up here. And she's like, well, how are we going to grocery shop? She's like, well, I can just walk to the grocery store now. And you can, Carrie, so you could see her saying this. And I do you have anything else for me? Like, do you have anything else for me? But essentially, despite how much I wanted to move and how much she didn't want to move, that's why it took us 5 years and $50,000 extra. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie.
The gift that Chanel keeps on giving was because, I did not want her to compromise. I wanted us to get to the highest level we could get to together. So what I didn't, took way longer than I would like it to have taken. But reality of it is because I didn't want, and she's like, well, you compromised so that we stayed in DC longer for me to do this. I was like, no, I really didn't. I didn't compromise. We could not get to the highest level together. So it didn't make sense to make a move.
Right.
And, a lot of people are like, well, like marriage is compromise and you can't always get what you want. Absolutely. But I take it out of this idea of compromise and start finding a way to get to your marriage to the highest possible level in every single small decision, from pizza and chicken to moving. Because when you do that, then there's no leftover resentment. There's no compromise currency. Think about it. Your spouse moves across the country for you because you got a job and you're thriving in that job and everything else. And then your spouse gets a job in Africa. And now it's like, okay, are you going to pay back on that? That's not real. Like, again, like, and then you then create a situation that's like, you're not on each other's team. And so that's why I really hate compromise, because we don't do it well.
Yeah, it's hard. And it all boils down to communication and actually saying what you need, saying what you want, and then going from there with the other person. Like, there's your timeline, your spouse's timeline, and then the timeline you need to create together. And like, you think of it as three people. I think of it as three roads, right? It's like, this road, and then this road that we need to take together. And I think that's important to view it that way, because if you view it as like me, that's what you're going to wind up with. You're going to be by yourself.
Yeah, quite literally. And again, it's, what? Love is not enough in marriage. Love isn't enough anywhere. Love is an emotion.
No.
You know what I mean? And I think too, it's just like, I really wish we would stop measuring like intimacy based on like your sex life, because that is such a superficial level of intimacy. Like, true intimacy is found in your communication. Like, that's what elevates your sex, like, like this very physical thing. Like, intimacy, again, is based on a connection. Sex is physical, like your marriage is not, good or bad or in danger based on the number of times a week you are having sex.
And to be quite honest, you would probably have it more the better communication you had. Like I am a person that I don't like to ask for help. I wasn't raised that way. I was raised do it on your own, whatever. But like this week, there was things like I didn't feel like going to the store to get the Valentine's Day cards. I tried doing a pickup order and they canceled the whole thing. I'm like, oh, I have to go to the store. I ran out of diapers. Yeah, like I ran out of diapers for Owen. There were so many things that I just did not feel like going to the store. And I asked Mike to do it. And literally he was like, yeah, no problem. Like, I'll do it. And a couple years ago, he might be like, oh, I got all this stuff to do. And like, be like, yeah, I'll do it. But like begrudgingly. I'm telling you, like that man gets it. Be like, I was more likely to be like, when are you going to be home? I'm going to make sure I'm awake.
Well, right.
You brought the diapers home. Let's go.
Care of, and so
Yeah.
again, and also when you start to really shift from marriage being this idyllic thing and more of a partnership in which not 50-50. It's never going to be 50-50.
No, that's, yeah.
Number of and pulse on each other. I know when Carrie can only give 10%. I might not love it, right? I might, whatever have you, but I know about it. And it is always so much easier when we have communicated and she actually tells me what's on her mind rather than I ask her to do something and she gives me a shitty first response. And then I want to rip her face off because as a human, the first thing I think of is everything I do. And I'm like, all you quite literally do is go to work. That's your responsibility is just to go to work. But again, that anger doesn't get me anywhere, anywhere closer to that. But then the second she lets me in a little bit to being I'm feeling insecure about this or whatever it is, all of a sudden my capacity to handle more increases so much because she's my number one. I want to take care of her and I always want her to be okay because I feel like she does that for me. But without that ability to communicate and be on that same wavelength with her, it's just we're against each other. F you. I'm so over your shit. Go to therapy and get out of my face.
Yeah. Oh my God. 100%. I can't even tell you how many times. And literally the only time Mike and I really fight is when our communication is off.
Oh.
And and then that's what it really boils down to because when your communication is off, you're on two different islands, I swear.
Speaking different languages from those islands, and one of you might be faxing and the other one is a telegram. But
yeah, for real.
So I'm curious to know how you guys get on the same page. And then I want to share before we go, just kind of one of my tools or what I've instituted in my marriage to kind of help us. Cause I think date night every night also has a lot of expectations and things of that nature. And while it can be fun, I don't often think it gets at this core root of communication. And that's, I think what every relationship always needs is that time to communicate. And also to me, it's if you're working on that communication and you guys can't get to that, if you're actually working on communication, keeping it the focus and it's not working, then you have a really clear, concrete way of being this is not a good match because we can't find a way, whether it be your trauma or your triggers, whatever, to communicate. If you can't work through that, then it's time to get a third party in there that's not biased so that you guys can either work on that communication. That's why, in my opinion, couples therapy works. It's not because I do anything magical in there. It's quite literally just a third person to slow everything down so you don't get caught in old communication patterns.
Yeah. And I will say for us, to answer your question, we've been married, it'll be 12 years this summer. And I will say, Mike and I are very different people. He's more reserved, thinks about things. I would say more impulsive, more outgoing, more, it's good. It's we're a yin and yang, but a lot of our coming together really took me kind of taking a step back and analyzing things about myself that I really needed to work on. And, he had to do the same thing, but I think I expect a lot. I'm not someone that really I sometimes feel my way or the highway.
You're very direct too, I would say, with one of the things that in our relationship together, that you had, I felt you did a really good job adjusting to was realizing that you had to be a little softer. You know what I mean? Your direct thing was directly hitting a trigger of mine. You being so direct was directly hitting a trigger of mine that was I could never hear what you were saying sometimes. You know what I mean? Some of our, I was calling me. And you're no, we're going to finish this. And I'm not if you keep attacking me like this. You're I'm not attacking you. I'm just talking. I'm this isn't going to work. I was trying to unplug all of the phones. Why is she won't stop, which I think is a great, right. And I know you bring that to your marriage too. But I'm not saying Mike needs a little softer side of you, but I do think, right, that, I know for our, you had to adapt there.
Yeah. There's a level of, I would say, empathy that I needed to acquire. And that's hard. It's hard to take a step back and look at yourself.
Perspective. You know what I mean? You have to try to, it's hard to blame the other person and whatever they did or whatever have you. rather than to step back. And I think to your point about earlier about like why marriages don't work, it's like most people don't want to take that step back and say like, oh shit, I have a lot of healing to do to be the best version of myself before I can even sit here and start to berate you about how to be the best version for me. Right?
Yeah, it's hard. I remember like, I don't know, we were probably married for like 5 or 6 years and I can't remember exactly what it was, but we were fighting a lot. And I'm like, I took a step back and I'm like, okay, like what is the common denominator? Like, why do we keep fighting? I just don't understand. And it really took work on myself and work on me to like, I wouldn't say lower my expectations, but like not give, like you can't have unrealistic expectations for your partner also. Like, of course you want your partner to exceed your expectations, but like giving them something unrealistic and unattainable and then getting mad at them for it, that's not going to work either.
It's like falling in love with the potential. You know what I mean? Like you can't want, right? Like, if you're
Yeah.
like, I want Mike to get his doctorate to like, you know, in the next 3 years or whatever have you, like, and you are so hung up on that. But like, again, it's just like, it's falling in love with potential. And it's also, I think expectations are also part of our childhood. They're part of, right? They're our inner kind of narrative, right? Like, why do you hold such high expectations for yourself? I bet you there's a reason in there that has to do with something you've been through that shows that. And also most people, I mean, for me, hidden expectations, not going to work, right? Not like I need my expectations to be right out here. I will always meet your expectations. I need to know them. But most people don't take the time to know what they truly expect and then communicate them, right? Like, so did Mike even know what your expectations were? Never mind if they were too high or not, but did he know how high they, you know?
Right. And that's part of the problem. So I would say, and like he was always a really good communicator. And like we also like we still do handle arguments very differently, but like, whereas like he needs it solved right then and there. And like I can say that it's solved, but like I don't want to hug and kiss you afterwards. I need like a good, like I need to simmer because I still like, I love you and like we fixed it, but I still want to punch you in the throat. So like I need
And I wonder too, like
a second.
I'd wonder, like, I know for me too, in my family, right, we'd have these big explosions. And then the next minute we would be like as if nothing happened. And so it took me a really long time to realize like that was not normal fighting. Like that is not normal to have those explosions. And I feel like culturally, like I could see them being like very loud and getting into it. And then the next minute kind of adjusting back to, you know, and like, again, it's interesting, right? Two people from completely different backgrounds come together and then like build this life together with so much baggage that you have to work through. You have to acknowledge, right? Like, do you want to have the exact same marriage as your parents? Do you over-idolize that? Or, you know, sometimes you don't even see like, oh, wow, my parents are really codependent. Like, I don't want that really for my relationship. Or, you know, the opposite.
Right.
You want to be so different from your parents that you bring that to your... It's so, like, I guess, like, in layered and complex. And that's why it's so much work. Because it's not just work on the marriage. It's or the family or the this or the happily ever after. It's, you know, really just the beginning, in my opinion, of like finding yourself when you get into a relationship. You know, I've noticed so many times work and your biggest traumas are revealed in a relationship, right?
Definitely. So like you definitely have to work on yourself and you have to work on yourself with each other. You have to communicate. You have to like be very honest about what you want, even if you feel like it's going to hurt your partner. Like you have to be honest about it. And I think once like I started doing that, it allowed Mike to really take a step back and be like, okay, like maybe these are my shortcomings in what like she is needing or expecting from me. And it really did like turn a corner for us. And when you have a strong communication like with each other, when you add outside factors like children or job changes or money issues or, you know, death in family or like all these other factors that like can really stress a marriage, if you're strong at your core with communication and stuff like that, like those outside factors, you're going to get through them together. Yeah. And, you know, I think we're doing a pretty good job. I mean, I don't know. He'll probably irritate me later at some point in time, but like, I'm going to keep him.
Exactly. You know, and I think too, also having that like foundation, and it took me a really long time to get this through Carrie's head, is like, I'm going to hate you probably 96% of the time, or, you know, really just like, you're going to get under my nerve. Mm-hmm. I mean, what roommate really doesn't in a sense, right? But like, I need you to hear me when I say like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, we're in this. Like, and I promise to let you know, like, if there's ever a time in which like it has gotten to a level where I was like, I'm going to communicate. Like, you're not going to be blindsided. Every fight is not the fight that will end us.
Right.
And that made it so that we had such a better capacity to fight and truly like, or like snip at each other and know that like there's no fundamental damage being done to that.
Yeah. Like you felt a safe space where you could really say what you need to say at the time, because at the end of the day, like it's not going to crush your guys' marriage. You guys are going to be fine. You have to have a space in order to get out your truths.
Exactly. And figure out a way to make those truths work together. Before we go, I do want to share one tool that I have found very helpful and a lot of my couples have found very helpful in terms of like communication. Again, I think we really emphasize the date night and we try to make it like big and special. And that's great. I think everybody should have if your life is busy, maybe once a month date night schedule, and that be whatever you want. But what you can do weekly, every Wednesday, Carrie and I block 2 hours. She gets home at like 5:30 and we block from 5:30 to 7:30 where we have like wind down, we call it. Used to be a lot more wine than there is now.
Oh, I like that.
But essentially it is our time to tell each other what's really happening in our lives, go over work, because sometimes, by the time she gets home, done with coaching and stuff, like it's late and I don't want to tell her about something that happened at 7 a.m. in the morning. And she works in a school. So I don't talk to her all day long. We don't like, it's not like this whole back and forth communication. Or sometimes she sends me this long text about something that happens, but I don't have it in me to like go over it. And we never get to connect. So this is the time where it's like, we might play a board game. We might do something like that, but it's sacred time. I mean, not everyone can do 5 to 7, but it is on our calendars. It's like, it's called wind down. It's the expectation. We don't go to a bar. We literally come to our kitchen island. We get a drink and we're like, okay, spill it. What's going on? And again, this isn't like, we wait to tell each other like what we hate about each other for that time or anything. It's more so just a time to like connect on all the things that I feel like gets missed in the hustle and bustle of a marriage, right? Like, or a hustle and bustle of like kids and this. And, a day goes so fast and it's just like protected, sacred time where we are just going to like, again, connect, laugh. Oh my God, did you see this reel or whatever? Like, and so it's been really, really great for us to like have that consistently. And again, it's like, you don't invite anyone. It's no one's over for dinner. It's not around dinner. So nobody has the pressure of like, planning or getting it done. You can just kind of come and I think adopting some version of that could be a very healthy tool for anyone out there listening who's trying to be like, how can I improve specifically on our communication? That's not like when it's in danger, right? This is a therapy or, it's kind of like a maintenance to that communication, I guess.
I like that. I might have to start implementing that.
You're welcome, Mike. We'll be back next week for another episode of You're Always Fine. Until then, mind your health.
Seriously, you're fine. You're fine because you have the power to access your place of peace anytime you need it. However, if you get stuck, we're right at the palm of your hand to help. Check out our show notes for this week's source list, recommended content, and Cabana live group schedule. We'll catch you next week for a brand new episode of You're Always Fine.
The team at Cabana has found your reset button. The answer? Cabana Pods, acoustic soundproof booths with immersive micro vacations proven to boost your mood in just 5 minutes. To learn more about Cabana Pods, visit www.evenhealth.com/pods.